Hey everybody, welcome. What's up? All right, so I got another treat for you guys today. All right, so just in case you've been tuning in to my YouTube channel, Uplift Past Crossroads, and you're a subscriber and you're a fellow uplifter. Again, the YouTube channel's titled Uplift Past Crossroads. So uplift like motivation, inspiration, past like past, present, future, crossroads, right? And so anybody that's a subscriber to Uplift Past Crossroads is a fellow uplifter. So what's up? All right, I'm Sean Christopher Jenkins. You can find me on Facebook, and LinkedIn, Sean Christopher Jenkins. Also, I'm on YouTube, like I said, Uplift Past Crossroads. I'm also on every podcast platform you can think of. Uplift Past Crossroads is the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Chromecast. All right, so if you've been tuning into my YouTube channel, you know that I just did a video on John chapter 9. So here it is right here, John chapter 9. And we were focusing on the story of the man born blind, right? So the man born blind, the one that Jesus, spit on the ground and made mud and put it on his face, and he ended up healing this man who was born blind, and now he could see. So we're about to do a whole characterization focusing on the neighbors of this study. So the first video we did was focusing in on the parents of the man born blind, and what insights and revelations does the author of John want us to glean from the characters of uh, from the parents of the man born blind, right? So the characters that are in the story of the man born blind. So now we're going to focus on another character that I haven't really heard sermons on. I'm going to ask you guys a question. Have you heard sermons focusing in on the neighbors of the man born blind? I have not. I only hear about the neighbors, like when it comes to Jesus and Barabbas and Jesus and the crowd. I've never heard a sermon focusing in on the neighbors of the man born blind. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And so, yeah, again, this is my YouTube channel, Upward Past Crossroads. So thanks for tuning in. And as you guys can see, I'm streaming on a lot of platforms. So I'm streaming on, my Facebook and LinkedIn page, Sean Christopher Jenkins. I'm streaming live on my X and Twitter page, troubledontlast. And I'm also streaming on my other Instagram page, my_day_Bible. But those are all my social media pages you can see on the screen right there. And then also, we did another ultrasound yesterday, me and my wife. So we got to see our son again, and it looks like he's growing into something, right? So we're at 33 weeks right now, and this is my son Zion Emmanuel Jenkins. Yeah, and so yesterday when we went to the ultrasound, I actually saw his face like pretty good this time around. I mean, I saw his face before when we were at 29 weeks, but yeah, this time it's like I'm looking in the mirror. Like, you guys tell me, you guys think Zion looks like me or my wife? So this is my wife right here, Maya. So you guys will see. You guys have seen her lately on my YouTube channel, Upper Past Crossroads. You'll see her way more. And then you got me right there. So, but honestly, like when I see my son right there, like he looks like me when I was a baby. He actually looked just like me. So when I saw him, I saw myself. So, all right. Yeah, and so here goes some more photos of him right here. Yeah, so I'm really excited of being a father, as you can see. It's a dream come true. And like I was saying, so before I even go into the study, so I just got a shout out on my suit. Thank you so much. Yeah, before I go into study, I want to tell you the inspiration of this video. So like the reason why I'm even doing this video is because this is a presentation I did for Seminary School, and actually it's a 100-slide presentation. So I was prepared for anything. Whatever the teacher wanted me to do, I was ready to do it, man. But obviously I didn't get to do all my 100-slide presentation during class. So I'm going to do it now. Well, I'm not going to do all 100 slides. I'm only going to do the first part of the presentation that I didn't get to talk about. So it was a chapter in this book right here. So let me go to the book real quick. So the book that we were reading, so the class I'm in is the Gospel of John. And so we're learning everything that you could possibly learn from the Gospel of John book, right? And so when I did my presentation for class, I was focusing in on John chapter 9, like we're going to talk about for today's video. And the book we were reading from was this book right here. So let me make it bigger for the screen so you guys can see every letter, every nit and cranny that's on this title of the book. So the title of the book's Character Studies in the Fourth Gospel Narrative Approaches to 70 Figures in John is by Stephen A. Hunt, D. Francois Tolme, and Ruben Zimmerman. These are the editors, and it's forward by Craig R. Coaster. All right, let me see what else I got for you guys. So one of the chapters in that book was titled The Neighbors of the Man Born Blind, A Question of Identity. And so this section in the book really touched me a lot. So I didn't get to talk about it for class. So I'm going to do it for you guys. Because like when it comes to seminary school, let's talk about that for a minute. When it comes to seminary school, you learn a whole lot of things, a whole lot of different approaches to scripture and different ways to interpret scripture. You learn, you basically receive different stuff in your arsenal to be able to go to, like get different tools in your arsenal, get different, you learn different methods and ways of being able to decipher and figure out scripture verses. So the reason why I even went to seminary school was because I want all those options. I want more stuff in my arsenal. I want to know I already know how to interpret scriptures and how to figure it out and stuff like that. And I have a lot of knowledge and stuff like that. Like that's one of my spiritual gifts, in teaching and all that stuff. But like when it came to seminary school, I just really wanted to like hone my craft. Like I'm trying to perfect it, man. I want to be the best ever when it comes to preaching and interpreting scripture and all that stuff, breaking it down, exegeting text. I can keep on going. So so for this study I'm about to give to you guys, we're going to focus on John chapter 9. 1 through 13, those verses. And I'm gonna go ahead and read it. And so when I read it, I want you guys just to think about the different characters you see in the gospel, in this gospel chapter, in John chapter 9, right? And just we're looking at stuff from a narrator perspective. So what does the author say with how he's writing and his approach in writing the Gospel of John, right? So we're in John chapter 9. And we're going to start with verse 1, going all the way to verse 13. I'm reading from the New International Version Bible. All right. And this section is titled, Jesus Heals a Man Born Blind. So as he went along, he saw a man born blind from birth. His disciples asked, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no man can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. The word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. All right, so this part is really important. We're going to come back to that throughout the study, right? All right, and so verse 8 of John chapter 9 from the New International Version Bible. His neighbors and those who have formerly seen him beg and ask, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claim that it was. See, they were debating if this was the man. That's really important too. So I'm trying to highlight it right there. Whatever. You never highlight perfect on this app. Bible Gateway, get it together. So some claim that he was. Others said, no, he only looks like him. But he himself said, I am. See, that is what you guys got to get right there. See, all this is significant. It's going to come back in the study. See, I love the Bible so much, man. It's about to get good. All right. So now when how then were your eyes open? They asked. He replied, the man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. So he obeyed Jesus and got what he wanted. Hallelujah. All right. Verse 12. Where is this man? They asked him. I don't know. He said, the Pharisees investigate the healing. That section. All right. So verse 13, last verse we're going to read. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been born blind. Question is, why did they bring him to the Pharisees? So, all right, so let's get to the study. You guys ready for this? It's about to get good, man. All right, so again, this chapter of the book is titled The Neighbors of the Man Born Blind, A Question of Identity. All right, And so I want you I want you guys to think about these questions throughout the video, right? We're gonna answer every single one just from me talking and stuff, but I want you guys to answer it too. Like, yeah, so it's about to get deep, all right? So first question I got for you guys is, have you ever considered the neighbors in the text of Jesus healing this man born blind, his parents, etc.? And then also, how has sermons typically been preached about the neighbors of the man born blind? The text that we're in John 9. And then why do we hear sermons about why do we hear sermons about the crowd when Jesus was put on trial, but not hear sermons about the neighbors of the man born blind? All right. And so in the introduction of this section of the book, this chapter that we're focusing in on in this book, the author wrote about the neighbors of the man born blind, and he said that the neighbors played a crucial role in the narrative of John, despite their brief appearance in John chapter 9, verse 8 through 13, what we just read. So the neighbors arrive on the scene as the man born blind returns from the pool of Siloam after his healing in John 9, 6 through 7. And the neighbors' appearance served as a surprise to the reader and hearer, us, who might expect Jesus to be the first to greet the man born blind after his healing. Jesus' absence is what stands out, though. Jesus does not reappear again until the end of the narrative in John 9:35. So we didn't read that verse. That's at the very end of chapter 9, right? And so then the neighbors' scene forms a bridge between the actual healing of the blind man in John 9, 6 through 7, and his interaction with the Pharisees in John 9, 5 through 17, and 24 through 34. So if you guys want to see more on that, check out my video before this on my YouTube channel, Uplift Crossroads, right? To learn about the Pharisees and the man born blind interaction with them. And then also the neighbors interaction, the blind man's interaction with the neighbors. Well, the interaction with the neighbors and the man born blind in John 9, 8 through 12 prepares the reader for the interaction between the Pharisees and the man in John 9, 15 through 17 and 24 to 34, right? And so focusing on identity, these interactions are centered around identity, in John 9. So the healed man's identity in John 9, 8 through 9, and then eventually Jesus's identity in John 9, 12, 15 through 17, 24 to 34. And the man is answering for both parties. So the man born blind, when he talks, he's answering for both of them, right? So this is a chapter on identity as well. So mythology. So modeled, adopted, proposed by Cornelius Beninem, building on the work of Yusuf Erwin Beninem proposes 3 continui or axes on which a character may be located. So this is a method we're going to use in deciphering and just figuring out what John 9 is talking about. So we're going to use, like I said, Cornelius Beninim's continui or axes of which a character may be located. So one of those methods is called complexity. So that's when a character can vary from singular traits to a nexus of traits and offer varying levels of complexity. And then also another method is development within the Benim continui or axes. All right, so characters may vary from those who exhibit little to no development or to those who exhibit a fully developed character. And then penetration into the inner life. So some characters are seen from the outside perspective with transparency, difficult to detect, while others have their conscious revealed from within. All right. So based on the 3 continui or axes of which characters are located in them, develops a 4-fold degree of characterization to plot along the continui. So one of those 4 degree of characterizations is an agent, actant, or a walk-on. So characters who fill a plot function and produce no response to Jesus. All right, so another 4-fold characterization is a type, stock, or flat character. So characters exhibit a single trait or show no development. And then the third one is a character with personality. So characters who demonstrate personality but no complexity or they're not completely shaped. And then the last one, the 4th one, is an individual or person. So characters who are the most developed or complex. All right. So when it comes to Vienna, he stresses the responses of the characters also need classification. So based on the takeaway view of the 4th evangelistic dualistic worldview and the connected statement in John 20:31, a character's response is viewed in 2 ways. In John chapter 9, the author wants us to glean and understand when we're reading his text, a character can only be defined by two. A character can only be classified in two ways, which either they're adequate or inadequate based on their actions. All right. And so John 20:31, which is the takeaway that the author of John wants us to take and apply to every single character, even based on their actions, which I would even stress that's the most important that the author of John's writing about. All right. So in John chapter 20, verse 31, the takeaway is, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So that's the whole entire theme of the Gospel of John. It's about what you do with Jesus, right? So this is about to get good. So the next section of that chapter in this book that I'm reading about John 9 is focusing on John 9, 1 through 7. It's on page 440 to 441. It's called Setting the Stage, Jesus, the Disciples, and the Blind Man. So the narrative opens with Jesus walking along, and he states he saw a man born blind. This leads the reader to anticipate the introduction of the neighbors in John 9:8. The neighbors they're recorded as those who had seen him in Mark 10:46. I'm going to read that in a minute, and that's going to be a huge focus for this video. And so the disciples questioned Jesus if this man's blindness was due to his sin or his parents' sin. This reference of the man's parents prepared the reader for the appearance in the text in John. They're in the text in John 9:18 to 23. So that's the video I did before. So you guys got to check that out. It's real deep, focusing on the parents. Like, were they the true? Did they have their sons back? Did they love their son? Like, were they on the side of Jesus, or were they on the side of man, of the Pharisees, of the religious establishment? Like, which side were they on, the devil or Jesus? Like, it was like based on the author and what he was trying to convey in the narratives writing. He was on the side of the world. So, all right. So another question I got for you guys is, with this text, is the blind Bartimaeus in Mark 10:46 the same as the man born blind in the text John 9? It's not, by the way. But in Mark 10:46, blind Bartimaeus receives a sight. This is what verse 46 says in the New International Version Bible. All right, so then they came to Jericho as Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city. A blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. So they're just both beggars and both blind. All right, but this one in John 9 that we're focusing on, this man born blind, he was born blind. So, all right. So setting the stage, Jesus' disciples and the blind man continues. So Jesus denies that the reason for the man's blindness was the man's or the parent's sin in John 9:2. Rather, the man's blindness is a means by which God's work will be demonstrated in the man's life in John 9:3. That's what Jesus said. All right. And so the author of John writes about an approaching darkness signaling the absence of Jesus, which is why Jesus acts on the blind man's behalf in order to make God known. Jesus insists in John that the disciples and him must perform the works of the one who sent him while it is day. The arrival of night signals that no more work can be performed. What he said in John 9:4. That was actually my trial sermon, by the way. You can see that on my YouTube channel, Uplift past Crossroads, in my sermons playlist, like where you can listen to all my sermons. All right. And so Jesus makes it plain in John 9:4. He is the light of the world. In John 9:5 and in John 8:12, he says that as well. So readers should recall with this, God is light, and that Jesus is the light of the world. So that's said throughout the Gospel of John. So that's another thing. John repeats himself a lot. Whoever wrote the book of John, they repeat themselves a lot, and everything connects and comes together. Right. And so after Jesus' pronouncement in John 9:5, he's the light of the world, he spits on the ground, makes mud, and places it on the man's eyes in John 9:6. So Jesus gives the man the instruction to go and wash in the pool of Siloam in John 9:7a. And the former man born blind will recount the scene to the neighbors in John 9:11, marking the most detailed retelling in the entire narrative, right? In John 9:15 and 27. So this is that last section right here. It's just talking about his interaction with the Pharisees. So when the neighbors gave this man born blind over to the Pharisees kept on asking, were you born blind? That's what they asked the parents, because they want to verify if this man was in cahoots with Jesus, And if they were running a scam because they ain't never heard anybody being healed, that was blind. But this man was born blind and was healed. So now they needed evidence if he was actually born blind. So the Pharisees asked the parents in that next section in John chapter 9, is this your son? Was he born blind? And how was he made well? So the parents only answered the first two, saying, we know he is our son, and we know he was born blind. And then the Pharisees asked on the second question, the third question really, how can he now see? And the parents didn't answer that question. They refused to answer that question. So in our narrative study, the first video we did, we talked about how the man, the parents kind of denied Jesus in the process. And actions speak louder than words. So you can give God lip service all you want, but it matters how you act. And if you act on his behalf throughout this world and through your everyday encounters and stuff like that, and every scene and every circumstance matters. So not to glorify him and not to make him visible in one area of life is not to glorify him at all, right? So that was our takeaway in a video before. So make sure to check out that again. All right, so let's go to the next section. All right, go to the next slide. All right, so sent by the ones sent. Sent by the sent one. All right, so the narrative points out Salome means sent, and the reader will recall Jesus is the sent one. So blindness is removed with reference to and with the aid of the sent. So the man's actions, the blind man's actions, are subsequent actions. He went, he washed, and he came home. And these mirror the threefold actions that we talked about earlier of Jesus, right? In John 9:6. So the result, the man born blind who was once born blind can now see. Both Jesus and the man play a role in the man's healing. All right. And so John 9:6 in the New International Version reads again, after saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with saliva, and he put it on the man's eyes. So it's funny how this man right here, the blind man, the man born blind, he mimics the threefold actions of Jesus. That he spit on the ground, so the blind man went. He washed. Jesus made some mud with saliva, and he put it on the man's eyes. Now he can see, so he can come home. All right, so we're gonna talk about that later in the video, I think. So one of the questions I have for everybody in my presentation was, do you have anything profound to say about how the man born blind mirrored Jesus's actions? Life application. I'm gonna probably talk about that later. Let's see if I get to it. All right. So sent by the sent one. So the reader might anticipate that Jesus would greet this man after his healing. Instead, the narrator introduces his neighbors, who are those who had seen him before as a beggar in Mark 10:46 and John 9:46. So the reader may note two details with the latter group's description. Seeing operates on two levels in John's gospel. So one, the physical attribute of sight, evident in restoration of the blind man's vision, and two, a metaphorical attribute often expressed in terms of proper knowledge linked to faith and discipleship. All right, so another question I have for everybody in the presentation was, isn't that how it is sometimes? Jesus does a miraculous thing in our lives, and we then have to deal with our neighbors. And that's the thing. I said that earlier. I said, that when the man born blind was healed, right, after Jesus healed him, the first people that the man encountered was the neighbors. He did not encounter Jesus first. And it's the same for us too. Like, once we get saved, once we come to Christ, once God comes into our lives and changes us, and there's a complete transformation, a complete 180, we become new creations. The old is no longer evident and no longer our way of life. God's doing a new thing, right? When that happens, the first people we got to deal with is our neighbors, our family, our friends, our colleagues. Like, we got to go back to our regular lives. Like, so we're on a high with God, but then we got to go back to our regular lives and deal with people, right? So you can never get away from people. So that's literally what the narrator is saying in the Gospel of John 9. So let's keep on going, man. It's about to get deep, all right? So the narrator, all right, so might send the reader a clue that those who are familiar, those who had seen with the man formerly born blind will have difficulty seeing his new identity. The man born blind is described as a beggar, making the first time in the narrative this description is used of him. and the neighbors see him according to his former status. You guys get that? You know, sometimes in life, man, like it's not no sometimes. When God makes a change in your life when you first come to Christ, like no matter how much you try, some people will not, you know, get away from like who you used to be. Like they will always reference who you used to be. Like, and honestly, like it took, I ain't gonna lie, it took my parents a while to like, you know, believe the change that God did in me. Like they knew a change happened. It was evident. They were there. They were present. So they saw me evolving. But still, like, you know, some people fade away. Some people fold. You know, some people, you know, they don't endure to the end. Like, you know, they say they want to believe in Christ, walk for God and all these things, but then the world, you know, gets the best of them. The world takes them away. You know, the lust of the world and everything that the world has to offer, like they allow that to be more important to them than their love for God, right? Than serving God and loving God and doing things for God, right? All those and walking in purpose for God. You see what I'm saying? Like just having sex, you know, living for yourselves, getting what you want, you know, focusing on money, like living the worldly way, like that's your main priority. So like, yeah, you guys see what I'm saying. So like, it's a huge like dilemma in this Christian life, like when it comes to juggling, like, you know, living for God and living for the world. So like, you know, the narrator in the Gospel of John, you know, he's focusing in on for this video. We're talking about the neighbors, right? That the man born blind had to deal with. So he has completely changed. He has a new identity. He is not a beggar no more. He is not a man born blind no more. So, you know, the writer of the Gospel of John in John 9, like he's saying in this narrative, is said for the first time, he calls this man a beggar. It's funny, for the first time he said that, but the neighbors had been saying that. You know, that the key word that the gospel writer wrote was, you know, in the fourth evangelistic gospel was, you know, those who had seen, right? So those who were familiar with this man, those who have seen this man, those who probably grew up with this man born blind, like they had difficulty accepting this man's new identity. And that's how it is for a lot of us, right? No matter how much God changes your life, no matter how much God does in your life, no matter how much you completely change and turn away from your wicked ways and, you know, the former way that you used to live. Some people will never get over what you used to be. Some people will never get over, you know, what you used to do. Some people will only label you at, you know, as what you used to be in your past. And that's people though. That's the neighbors. So honestly, it doesn't even matter what the neighbors do with you, right? That's the whole point in John chapter 9. What matters is what Jesus does with you. Like the neighbors may say one thing about you. Your neighbors may say one thing about you. You know, people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues may say one thing about you, your children. But all that matters is what God says about you, what Jesus says about you. And that's John chapter 9, right? Like, so, yeah, so the neighbors see him, the man born blind, according to his former status, right? They can never get past his former status. And the question is, have you gotten past your former status? So now the man born blind, he can't walk as a man born blind no more. You're not blind no more. You can see. You've been given spiritual insight, spiritual enlightenment, spiritual revelation. You have received that. So now it's time for you to walk in like you can see, right? And now it's time for you to walk in the light, right? So you can't walk in darkness no more. So this is the text in John chapter 9. This is what the narrator is saying. He's saying a lot with just what's happening in the story in John chapter 9, the man born blind, when Jesus spits on the mud and heals him, right? And then focusing on the neighbors, right? So, yeah, I already read that. So let's keep on going. All right. So the neighbor's first question comes rapidly in John 9, 1-3. The first question is this not the man who used to sit and beg? The man's identity as a beggar is the focal point of the neighbor's reaction. So once the question is asked, the vision marks their response. Some believed he was the individual. In John 9:9a, we see that, but then in John 9:9b, we see that others insisted he only resembled the man in question. Right? That's powerful, man. So yeah, this section is called the absence of Jesus and the nosy neighbors. All right, I'm gonna come back to that. Let's see if I can remember that. All right, so reflecting Jesus. So the division and responses foreshadows the divided response of the Pharisees over the identity of Jesus. Oh, come on. In John 9:16. All right, I ain't gonna go there yet. Let's go back. All right. So the neighbor's first question is this not the man who used to sit and beg, right? Yeah, you know, sometimes in life, man, God does, when God saves you, he saves you from a lot, and especially for some people. All right. Some people have been saved from a lot, and their past was very dark. Right. And so this man born blind, he used to be blind. He was born blind. All he did was sit and beg. So some people expect this man to stay like that, to remain like that, to never move past that. And so the neighbor's reaction, you got to think about that, guys. Like, just have you ever seen anybody that was blind that could see again? I've never experienced that. I never, and it'd be something if you saw it, but it's something that you grew up with somebody that was blind. You saw them every single day, they were blind. You grew up with them as a child and they were blind. And then, like, as an adult, all they did was sit and beg because they couldn't do anything because they were blind. Everybody, and just think about that. Like, when it comes to handicaps and disabilities, just think about how many people just overlook, don't care for, and disregard the disabled, the old, the weak, and feeble in society, right? So, yeah, this is the reality in the identity of this man born blind, man. And this is the focal point. Get that? It's the focus of the neighbor's reaction. So there's the division, trying to figure out, is this the man? Is this the man? Now, what does that sound like? Is this the man? See, like, it's funny how in this story in the Gospel of John, the man born blind, it's kind of referencing Jesus. So, like, this section is titled "The Absence of Jesus and the Nosy Neighbors," right? And so in John 9:8-13, Jesus isn't present. Jesus is present in John 1-7 when he heals the man born blind, when he spits on the ground, makes mud, and he puts it on the man's eye, tell him to go and wash and be clean at the pool of Siloam, right? So Jesus is in that part of the story. He's also at the end of the chapter in John chapter 9 when, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the Jewish authorities, when the neighbors sent this blind man over to answer to those people, the Pharisees disregarded this man. Like, no answer was good enough for them. And they kept on asking him the same question. He kept on answering them. And he kind of resembled Jesus again, right? Because he was a smart aleck. He was very smart and sharp when he answered the Pharisees' questions. It kind of sounded like Jesus, right? And so that's the whole point of John chapter 9. Like, when God changes your life and turns your life around and showed you his love, like, it should change you. It should do something about you. It should give you confidence. See, the man born blind, when he was healed, he had confidence. It's like nobody could tell him anything different as to what happened and how he received his healing and how he got his sight. He was going to say exactly how he got his sight. He professed Jesus. He proclaimed Jesus was the reason why it happened. He said, I don't know where the man is, but I know what he did. Like, he kept on glorifying Jesus and praising Jesus. But with his parents, they refused to do that. They did not want to even give credit to Jesus, probably because they weren't even there when it happened. Or it said that the reason that the narrator gave, the author of John chapter 9, the reason he gave that the parents didn't profess Jesus in that situation was because they were afraid of the Pharisees. But even in fear, you got to speak up. Even when the odds are stacked against you, you still got to stand for God. So even when even when your life's on the line, you still stand for God. Even when people reject you and want to excommunicate you from the community, you stand for God, right? So yeah, the parents, they feared the Pharisees more because they didn't want to be excommunicated from the community, because the Pharisees, the religious authorities in that time period, the Jewish authorities, they had the power to include or exclude people from the community. So yeah, the parents cared more for being a part of that community than God's community. So even though the son got smart with the Pharisees and he was excommunicated from the community for professing Jesus, because that's who the Pharisees didn't like. At the end of John chapter 9, we see that Jesus, accepts and calls in the man born blind, who's now a healed man born blind that can see. He calls him to be one of his disciples, calls him to be one of his followers, and said, "Come with me. We got work to do." So yeah, so this is what God was doing with this text. Like, he was trying to say, like, if man rejects you, I accept you. Like, when a change happens in your life, this is how you need to react. You need to stand firm on what you believe. You need to speak up against things that need to be spoken up about. So this is what John chapter 9, the author's trying to convey with this text. So let's keep on going. It's about to get deep, right? So it took a lot to get to this point. So let's go ahead and see where it goes. So reflecting Jesus, right? In John chapter 9, verse 8 through 13, we see reflected in Jesus, the division and responses foreshadows the divided response of the Pharisees over the identity of Jesus in John 9:16. So some of the Pharisees claim that Jesus is not an agent sent from God due to his lack of observance of the Sabbath in John 9:16a. So one of the problems that the Pharisees had with this healing of the man born blind was that Jesus did it on the Sabbath, right? And Jesus' whole point is, if you're, he even said it in a scripture verse. I don't know where it was. I'll do a videos on it, sermons on it. But he said to the Pharisees, one point he made it up was long in another story. He said, if you're a horse and you're riding on a road, gets stuck in a trap, or falls on a wayside, or his feet get stuck in some mud, sinking sand or something, are you just gonna leave it and it's the Sabbath because it's the Sabbath? He said, no, you're gonna do everything it takes to get your horse out. And he said even David and his followers did that, before he was the king. So sometimes on the Sabbath, some stuff has to be done, especially if it's the work of God. If it's something to glorify God, you don't stop that from happening when your neighbor's in need and stuff like that. So that's the way Jesus operated. But the Pharisees, they cared about the law and the traditions and the religious way, the religious order, more than showing love and care for their neighbor. So which one was more important, right? Which one's more important to you? So that's the Gospel of John. That's what we getting from all the Gospels, actually, when it comes to the Pharisees' way of life versus Jesus, and which way we should be living. So there's a lot of Christians that put their denominations, their churches, their religion, their beliefs in the Bible, what their way, what they think the people should be living like and stuff like that. They put that above how they treat people, how they love on people, how they care for people. Like if somebody don't believe what I believe, or they're a different religion or something like that, screw them. And that's not the way we need to be living. So that's what we get from the Gospel of John as well. Let's keep on going. So while other neighbors question how a sinner could perform such signs in John 9:16b, the Pharisees, they question that as well. All right, so we got Pharisees. There's two different groups of people. So Pharisees had a problem with Jesus now observing the Sabbath, which doesn't make him an agent of God. And then other Pharisees, they were just confused as to how a sinner could perform a miracle like this, because they heard of other miracles. They had to have heard of other miracles of Jesus, right? I don't know the text like that, but I'm pretty sure they did. The story, like the timeline, where it's at. But I know they probably heard of other stories of Jesus. So that's why they even had this man born blind come to them, because they want to know more about Jesus, like really study him, figure him out. So some of the Pharisees, because he didn't observe the Sabbath, thought Jesus was a sinner, of the devil and stuff like that. But it didn't make sense how he could perform miracles like that, which that was the man born blind's whole point to them and his argument to them. So the disagreement of the neighbors is answered definitely by the man born blind himself with this statement, I am, in John 9:9c. So the reader cannot help but be struck by the irony of the man born blind self-declaration. In this part of the narrative in John 9:8 through 13, Jesus is absent. He will not appear again until near the end of the narrative in John 9:35. The man's declaration is supposed to evoke the presence of Jesus in his absence here. All right. So the neighbor's second question. So after the man's declaration, the once divided neighbors now ask a question in unison. How were your eyes open? In John 9:10, this same question is echoed by the Pharisees later in the narrative in John 9:15 and 26. And so reflecting Jesus, how did this man born blind reflect Jesus? This man's response serves to shift focus back to the identity of the healer, Jesus, John 9:11. So the Pharisees may have Jesus' identity messed up. Is he a sinner? But how can a sinner perform such a miracle? Is he of the devil? He ain't an agent of God. He doesn't observe our laws. He's not a Jew because he doesn't do anything the Jews should be doing. So this was the dilemma about Jesus, right? There was a dilemma about this man born blind too. They couldn't figure out, was he the man who was born blind, or was he the man who or does he just resemble the beggar that we seen in the street, sitting in the street begging, right? Who is this man born blind? So there's a disagreement about the neighbors as to who this man born blind is, and there was a disagreement about Jesus, about who Jesus is, right? So you see how the whole point of John 9 is like when Jesus changes your life, when he comes to your heart, the Holy Spirit and all that stuff, right? When that change happens, like you should reflect Jesus. Like that's what John 9 is talking about. Man, let's keep on going. I ain't gonna spoil it yet. It's about to get good. All right. So, all right. So the man born blind the man called Jesus in John 9:11. So they called Jesus the man as well, like the man born blind. Echoes the beginning of the narrative when Jesus discovers a man blind from birth in John 9:1. So this is a shift in identity, which is the focus in the next section in John 9:15 to 17 to 32, where Jesus ironically remains nameless, much like the man born blind. See, okay, that's what I was gonna say. I'm gonna go ahead and say it because I think I said it in the other slides, but let's get to it right now. All right. So when Jesus comes into your life and changes your heart, you know who should resemble Jesus? You, right? You know who should reflect Jesus? You. So Jesus, he's gone, right? He's dead. Some people think he's dead. He ain't alive, right? But he rose from the grave. Now we got the Holy Spirit and all that stuff. So who should resemble Christ? Who is Jesus supposed to be gone? No, like when that change comes into our lives and into our hearts and into our spirits, like Jesus should be evident. He should be made known through our lives, through the way we interact with people, through our love, through our care, through everything. Everything about us should speak Christ, right? It's kind of like growing up. It's crazy how it's old now, but in like 2010, in high school, 2008, 2007, 6, you guys remember if you were alive then. There was a saying called "What would Jesus do?" So WWJD, right? And so yeah, that is more powerful than what that saying. Yeah, it's more powerful than what that saying was at that time, right? Like a lot of people didn't get it. It was just a saying, right? It's just a wristband we all wore on our wrist, but we didn't really get it. What would Jesus do? Like this man born blind, like in John 9, it's saying that this man literally he took Jesus's place. So like Jesus bore a cross. Now we're called to bear a cross. Like Jesus, denied this world, forsake all its treasures, just focused on living for God. We should be doing the same thing. So, even though Jesus is, not here physically, right? Talk, we can't like talk to him like I can talk to you and call you on the phone and stuff like that. But like you guys see what I'm saying? Like you can't touch him, right? He's not physical. Let's be real, right? Some people are gonna argue with that statement, but there's nothing to argue about. Like he's not here, right? But he is present through other believers, through people who come to him and who he has given spiritual enlightenment to, spiritual insight, spiritual revelation, spiritual sight to. I keep on going. So like when that happens, like even though Jesus isn't present, he's present through you. Like we're supposed to be living servants. We're supposed to be representatives of Christ, messengers of Christ, messengers of God. Like, it's kind of what Paul said, I've been crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but Christ lives through me. The life I live through the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and died for me. That's Galatians 2:20. Like another scripture verse is like 1 Corinthians 7:20 and then 1 Corinthians like 6:23. It's around there. It says like Paul says, I was bought with a price. My life's not my own, yeah, you were bought with a price. Your life's not your own. Like everything about this life is about us being representatives of God, representing Jesus, right? We're living servants. So a lot of people may not go to church, may not even care about reading the Bible and stuff, but we're living Bibles. We are the Bible. We should be. So everything, our whole actions, our whole way of being, our whole way of doing life as believers, as Christians, as Christ followers, it should resemble the Bible. Like people should get sermon, even though they don't go to church, sermon should be preached by your actions and the way you live and the way you talk and the way you do things in this world. Like people should be able to see Jesus and come to Jesus just based on your actions, not even based on what you say, right? And so like this man born blind is a caricature of that. Ooh, I'm getting nerdy, man. He's like his characterization in this chapter based on what the narrator wrote, the author of John in John 9. He's saying like there's a shift of identity. Like even though Jesus isn't present, even though Jesus wasn't present in the rest of the text, right? He was only present at the beginning and at the end. So even though he ain't present in our lives, right? Sometimes it feels like he's still present, right? And he's present through you. Ooh, this is getting good. All right. So like a lot of times we come to Christ and then we die and then we're going to be with Christ again. But a lot of times people forget about the in-between, right? So we have a birthday, when we come to Christ, and then we have an end day when we actually die in the flesh, right? And then we will receive our resurrected bodies and all that stuff, and we're in heaven forever, right? But there's an in-between period, the life on earth, doing life with Jesus, walking in purpose, walking and bearing our crosses, humbling ourselves, denying ourselves, right? All those things, forsaking our flesh. So like there's an in-between period where everything that we do for Christ, will be rewarded. Everything we do for Christ, it could be condemned if we don't live for Christ, right? So like everything we do in the in-between, in the meantime, after we receive that revelation from God, and when we die, it matters so much. There's so much significance, so much weight. And like, even though Jesus isn't present, that don't mean he's not present. Oh yeah, this is getting good. There's a saying, it says like, when the king's away, or when the cat's away, the mouse come out. Yeah, when the cat's away, the mouse come out and play, right? And so people think because God's not around, and because God isn't present, or at least it feels like he's not, so Jesus isn't present, I can live the way I want. I can do what I want. But we see in this text in John chapter 9, right? We see that this man born blind, he didn't live like that. Like once Jesus changed his life and came into his heart, and this whole change came into his life, and Jesus gave him spiritual insight. Like just think about how much Jesus did for this blind man. This blind man could not live like he used to live. He could not keep on begging in the streets, acting like he can't see, when God then opened his eyes to see so that he could do more and be more, right? That's what God does for us. And when that happens, a shift needs to happen in our identity, right? We can't live and remain what we were. We have to evolve into who Christ made us to be, into Christ, right? Into Jesus. And that's a high call. That's a hard cross to bear, right? That's a hard thing to do. It's really impossible in the flesh, right? Like that's a work of God. Only God could do that for you. So it's a work of God. So this man born blind symbolized like this impossible thing being done on multiple fronts. It's not just that he got spiritual sight. Well, it's not just that he got physical sight. He got spiritual sight as well. He could see Jesus for who he was. We see that all in the Gospel of John chapter 9. Like this man born blind, when he was healed by Jesus, like he's the only one who could see Jesus for who he was. That's the whole text in John chapter 9. So he's the only one who God really gave this enlightenment to about who he is. Like the neighbors missed out on this, and the parents missed out on this. And we all know the Pharisees, the Jewish authorities, missed out on this. Now, some of them in those group of people probably didn't miss out on it, but the majority of them did. That's the text in the whole Gospel of John, in all the Gospels, right? So like, the question is like, have you missed out on this revelation? Like, have you seen not just how important, not just how significant Jesus is, but like how he's everything, how he's literally how you need to be living. Like what he did is what you should be doing, right? Jesus even said, I've done miracles, but even greater works will my followers do, right? Even my followers will do even more than what I did. That's a bold statement. I don't know why Jesus said that. Like, because sometimes it feels like, no, Jesus, you're crazy. Like, who does that? Nobody does what you did. Like, who can do those kind of miracles, right? But it's not about that. It's just about being representatives of Jesus. In our story, our part matters. So, like, we got to be living as Jesus would in our situations of life. So I need to be living like Jesus would live if he was Sean Christopher Jenkins. You need to be living like Jesus would live if he was you, right? Like, we're supposed to be taking Jesus's place in our lives. One of my favorite scripture verses, I haven't found it in a while. Definitely going to do a life verse on it. So on my YouTube channel, I have life verses. I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of my favorite verses of all time is when Peter said it for sure. Is in one of the Peters, first or second Peter. Peter said, we only receive a portion of what Jesus went through. So like, we only have to drink a little bit of the cup, of the whole entire cup that Jesus drank. And Jesus even said that to the disciples one time, like to the disciples who wanted to be great in his kingdom, and the disciples were arguing who's the greatest. And Jesus was like, whoever can drink from my cup will be the greatest. But who can drink from Jesus's cup? You can't take and bear what Jesus did. Like if you said you can, okay, let's crucify you, but not just crucify you. Let's beat you down. Let's spit on you. Let's make you walk like 10 miles to your crucifixion, to your death, holding your cross after being whipped 39 times with glass, shards of glass, wire whips of iron and metal shards. Like, let's whip you 40 times, then put wool on you and then take it off, put it on again, take it off with your wounds open and, infected and all that stuff, after a few days, and then crucify you. And let's not talk about the crucifixion. Like, who can bear that? There's nobody on earth that could bear that. That's the reason why Jesus went through it, man. Only he could drink from that cup. And it wasn't just that. Jesus bared a lot. He did a lot for us, right? But like all of us have a part to play in your life, your story, what God has always done with your life. That's your story. That's your part to play in God's kingdom. Now, are you living the way Jesus wants you to live in your part in the story so that as many souls can be saved, so that God could be glorified? Like that's the text in John chapter 9. That's the way we need to be living. And that's what we get from this man born blind story. So let's talk about the neighbors a little bit more in John chapter 9. All right. And we're still in the section of the book, the section in that chapter of the book titled The Absence of Jesus and the Nosy Neighbors, right? So the neighbors now wants to know who Jesus is and where Jesus is, all right, after discovering how the man was healed. So the neighbors ask, where is this man? In John 9:12a, the question appears harmless at first, but it's the exact question the Jews, the Pharisees, asked at the beginning of the tent festival in John 7:11, before they crucified Jesus, right? Where is this man, right? I think that's that text. I don't know. So this reminds the reader that Jesus is still wanted by the religious authorities, which means Jesus' life is still in danger. This encourages the reader of the text to see the neighbor's role in the narrative as a negative one. The man's response is brief, I don't know, in John 9:12b. All right. All right, so later in the narrative, in response to the Pharisees' accusation of Jesus as a sinner in John 9:24c, the man born blind pleads ignorance of knowing whether Jesus is a sinner, but quickly confirms to the Pharisees when the Pharisees ask, what do you got to say about this man, basically? The man born blind declares, one thing I do know, that I was blind and now I can see in John 9:25. So as a result, the narrative reveals a growing understanding on the part of the healed man concerning Jesus, as the man refers to Jesus as a prophet in John 9:17. The man refers to Jesus as sent from God in John 9:32, before ultimately coming to full understanding in John 9:38. So one question I got for you guys is, what if the author was more so referring to the man born blind being blind spiritually and not really being blind physically? And I think that's what the author's really trying to convey through the text when it comes to everybody else, the neighbors, the religious authorities, the religious leaders, like all of them were spiritually blind. The man born blind was blind physically. So what he was is what everybody else is, right? But then Jesus gives this man sight. He heals him from his blindness and tries to tell the religious authorities and the neighbors and everybody, the parents of the man born blind, like, this could be you, but they refused to see. They didn't want to be healed. They didn't want to be made well. They weren't willing to do what Jesus said do in order to be healed, like this man born blind was to receive his healing physically, right? So the neighbors, so the narrator records the lax action of the neighbors in John 9:13. They brought to the Pharisees him who was formerly blind. The only other time in John's gospel is where they brought is used in John 18:28, when Jesus is being led to the tent of the Roman official guard to face the interrogation by Pilate. So this might give the reader indirect evidence in judging the neighbors negatively according to their actions here. So John 18:28 reads, then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Cephas to the place of, no, that's Caiaphas, from Caiaphas to the place of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace, but because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So let's talk about the sinister, menacing, unfavorable neighbors of the man born blind. So in John 7:53, 8 through 11, that's the story of woman in adultery, the woman caught in adultery, right? So the scribes and the Pharisees bring a woman caught in adultery to Jesus in John 8:3, and they try they try and convict her and ultimately put her to death. They and ultimately try to put her to death. All right, but up until this verse, the neighbors appear to be both curious and innocent of the malice intent towards the man born blind. Yet the act of bringing the man to the Jewish authorities sends sinister overtones. Right. So circling back to Vienna's criteria we talked about earlier, complexity, development, penetration, and like let's categorize, how we see the neighbors and measure to those three criteria that BM gave us. All right. So when it comes to complexity, the neighbors are presented as curious as their question demonstrates in John 9:8 and 10 and 12. So they can be classified as suspicious. Certainly, the neighbors were aware when the healing took place. The narrator points this out in John 9:14. The neighbors may have wondered about its legitimacy. One can conclude their act of bringing the man born blind to the authorities portrays their motive. The neighbors' initially curiosity is regarded more negatively. They exhibit an air of suspicion, which leads to their actions of uh, bringing the man born blind to the Pharisees in John 9:13. So, in terms of complexity, the neighbors aren't complex characters as they exhibit only two traits: curiosity and suspicion. So, they're not complex. All right. And then when it comes to development, the neighbors show very little. However, one could argue that the division that takes place in their responses as to the man's identity in John 9 it replaced their following questions in John 9, 10, 12, and their act of bringing the man born blind to the Pharisees in John 9:13, and their penetration into the inner life. So this one was real confusing to me, but I get it. But they should name this one different. The criteria of minimum, or whatever his name is. So the division in John 9 is similar to the character self-talk. The narrator informs the inner monologue of the neighbors as they dispute the identity of the once man born blind. So the neighbors using Venno's fourfold degree of characterization model fits probably most comfortably as a type, stock, or flat character. So these characters display a single trait and demonstrate little to no development, display a skeptical attitude towards the man born blind as their questions and reactions reveal, which ultimately leads them to bring the man born blind to the religious authorities in John 9:13. So the neighbor's presence in the narrative foreshadows the Pharisees, right? It shows the Pharisees, uh, actions and heightens the disputes over Jesus' identity that is to follow, right, in the Gospel of John. So the response of the neighbors are nevertheless seen as inadequate. Remember, there's only two responses when it comes to a character in the Gospel of John. Either a person's actions, any character you can talk about in any story in the Gospel of John, their actions are either categorized as inadequate or adequate. That's it, right? It's only two different responses you can have. So the neighbors using the Brenham fourfold degree of characterization model, Benino argues we must allow the fourth evangelist, so the Gospel of John writer, to set the terms to evaluate whether a character's response is positive or negative. All the characters and their responses can be appropriately measured in light of the dualistic worldview of the author in a statement in John 20, verse 31. Everything was written so that we know that Jesus is the Messiah. Everybody that believes in him will be saved. That's John 20, 31, basically that. And then the neighbors are portrayed to be negative because it is confirmed by their skepticism concerning the identity of Jesus in John 9, 11 through 12, and it was confirmed when they hand the blind man over to the religious authorities. So I think this is it. So my last question is your conclusion about the neighbors to the man born blind in the John 9, 8 through 13 narrative? Yeah, what is your conclusion about the neighbors of the man born blind in the in John 9, 8 through 13 narrative? And then also, did you learn anything new that you never thought about before, focusing in on the neighbors of the man born blind? All right, yeah, all right, cool. So I'm done with that, I think. Because now I can break it down. All right, yeah. All right, so the whole point of doing this video, I want you guys to see, is like there's so many characters in a story of a Bible, in any story of the Bible, in any narrative of the Bible, however you want to slice it, any passage of the Bible. A lot of times, like we skim and we forget about the characters in a story, and we just focus on the main characters, right? We don't focus on the surrounding characters and every single character that like the author writes in a story. Like for example, when it comes to like, I hate when we do it, but like I've never really heard sermons on genealogies and like a whole list of names, like whenever that comes around in a chapter of a Bible. So, like for example, Matthew 1 starts off talking about the genealogy of Jesus. I think in Luke 2, I think Luke chapter 1, starts off with a genealogy as well, or it's Mark. It's one of those two. But either way, like when it comes to genealogy, it gives a name of all like of Jesus's ancestors. So everybody that's in Jesus's lineage that came before Jesus to make Jesus, right? So it's his grandparents, his great 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 grandparents, and people like that. So his forefathers. But like we read like a whole list of like 50 names in a chapter, like when it gives like a genealogy, but we don't really focus in on like their story, like who they were, like why are they in a genealogy, like, and then how amazing it is that some of them are in a genealogy. Like for example, like Judah, like Jesus came from the line of Judah. Judah was one of the 12 children of Israel, of Jacob, and he was one of the children who sold Joseph into slavery. Actually, it was his idea to sell Joseph into slavery because the other brothers wanted to kill Joseph, right? But Judah saved him by saying, "Let's just sell him into slavery." But like you could tell from his actions, like that's inadequate. Who would do that to their sibling? Who would do that to their brother? So like this man is in the lineage of Jesus. He's in the genealogy of Jesus. Judah. You got Tamar. She was Tamar wasn't that bad. It depends which Tamar we're talking about. So I'm gonna skip over her. Rahab, she's in the genealogy of Jesus. She was a prostitute. Ruth was the only good one, right? Mary's pretty good. Yeah, Tamar, I think Tamar, like, so there's a debate which Tamar it was. So Tamar was one of the children of David. So she was raped. So it's either her or it's another Tamar. I think the other Tamar was a prostitute or something like that. But either way it goes, like nobody is perfect in Jesus's genealogy, in Jesus's history, right? Anybody before Jesus. So why would Jesus choose to be a part of that? Why would he choose to let them be his ancestors? Why would he choose to be in their line? Right? What made them more important and special than everybody else? Like nothing, right? They're sinners just like everybody else. So like I forgot what I was saying with that. But like yeah, characters. So names is not something you should just gloss over. Like different characters in a story, when it comes to the Bible, it's not just people. They're there for a reason. You got to figure out what that reason is. And like what I'm trying to say is like that's why I like seminary school. So like anytime we studied a narrative, so like for example the Gospel of John, like all of John 9. There's so many people in that story other than the man born blind and his parents and the Pharisees, the religious leaders. Like that's all we focus in on when it comes to sermons and stuff. I asked everybody at the very beginning of this video, how are sermons typically preached on John chapter 9, like of the man born blind and Jesus and the Pharisees and the parents of the man born blind. Like nobody focuses on the neighbors. Like just from this video, just from this presentation, like the neighbors really they were the Pharisees before the Pharisees. Like the question is, in verse 13, we saw in John 9:13. Like, why would the neighbors give this man over to the religious authorities, to the Pharisees? Like the religious authorities, they relegated and did everything in that community. They were over everything. So like they were like the lawmakers and the police and stuff like that. So they got to dictate not just who can be included or excluded from the community, but they dictated like if somebody was right and living right and like just stuff like that. Like they just had authority over everything in the Jewish community. And so like why would the neighbors give this man over to them? Probably because they were afraid of them too. Probably because they wanted the Pharisees' approval too. Like, and probably because the man born blind, like they probably heard like, well, the Pharisees care to know about Jesus, and maybe the man born blind can figure out what this Jesus fellow is all about, right? Because the neighbors, like we talked about, they asked the same question that the Pharisees asked. Where is this man? And then man born blind answered, I don't know. Right? And there's a reason why he didn't know, because it wasn't Jesus' time to for them to know where he was, for them to be able to ask him questions and stuff like that. There was too much work that needed to be done. So like the neighbors of the man born blind on so many levels, like they were just as bad, if not worse, than the Pharisees. Like, I want to go to the verses. Like, first of all, they were trying to tell this man who he was. Like, what he was. That's the whole point. He used to sit and beg. He don't sit and beg no more. He used to be blind and was a blind beggar and was born blind, but he's not those things anymore. Now he can see. So they couldn't get over him being able to see. Like the question they asked him was, how then were your eyes open? Like his eyes are open. No matter what answer he gave, like it was never good enough. They could never get past what he used to be. And that's how it is with some people. Like that's a sermon in and of itself. Like that's why you focus on so many different characters in a story on the Bible, because you can receive so much revelation from God, so much insight about, and so much truth about like how to live, and so much motivation as to like how to interact and deal with people. So like when it came to the neighbors, what am I talking about? Yeah, when it came to the neighbors not being able to get over about this man born blind's change. I mean, this man born blind even replied to the neighbors, like how he was able to see. The man they called Jesus, which they heard of him, made some mud, spit it in my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed. Then I could see. Like, he did the things that Jesus said to do, and then he could see. Like, they asked, how are your eyes open? Just do what Jesus said do. You'll be able to see too. Right? So, like, this man knew without a shadow of doubt how he could see. This man knew what Jesus did, and he could accept it. But not everybody can accept what Jesus and what God will do and has done for you, right? No matter how much you tell them, no matter how real it is to you, no matter how evident it is to you, right? Some people could never accept that change and that truth that is yours. And that's the story in the Gospel of John 9. Like, it's saying, like, your neighbors will turn you over to the authorities when they get a chance. Like, they will keep on asking you questions, and no matter what answer you give, no answer is good enough. So, even though, and then that's verse 12. That's so powerful. Like, they asked, where is this man that you said told you to do these things to be able to see, who opened your eyes? Where is he? He said, I don't know. So, despite him not knowing where this man is, he still was willing to tell everybody about this man that changed his life, about this man who did this complete change in him. Like, he still prophesied and still lived as if this change was still occurring in his life, because it is. He can see. He's not blind. So now he can't live like he's blind anymore. He has to walk differently. He has to talk differently. He has to act differently because he can see differently. It's the same thing for us, man. So yeah, this John chapter 9 chapter is so good, man. Like, I've never in my life ever heard anybody preach about the neighbors, except for when I read this chapter in this book. And then on top of that, you guys saw it. Like, the neighbors, they resemble the Pharisees. Like, and that's kind of what Jesus said in John chapter 15. He said, don't be afraid and don't be discouraged if this world hates you. Just know that it hated me before it hated you. If they hate the master, they're going to hate the student. If they hate the teacher, they're going to hate the student, right? Well, master, they're going to hate the slave, right? They hate the father, they're going to hate the son or daughter, right? So, like, you can't get away from who you are, right? So, like, whoever side you are on, that's who's going to like you, right? So, like, when it comes to the neighbors, their response to the man born blind and to Jesus is a negative one. It's an inadequate one. It's not good enough. That should not be the response of a believer, right? That's not a trait or a quality that a believer has. Turning over people who are on the side of Jesus, right? Denying the praiseworthy work that Jesus did for somebody when they were blind and now they can see, and you just give them over to people and say, hey, you deal with them. Like, no, you don't do stuff like that, man. You celebrate, you praise God with them. Like, you learn from them. You figure out where, you worship and praise Jesus with them. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, the neighbor's presence in the narrative of the Gospel of John 9, like, it doesn't just foreshadow the Pharisees, but like they literally were the Pharisees for the most part. Like, they were of their father, the devil. Like, so the devil did the same thing with Judas. He did the same. So the same thing that the neighbors did with the man born blind, right? Turn them over to the religious authorities, just like they did with Jesus. The Pharisees did with Jesus, right? Um, that's what Satan did to Jesus too. That's what Judas did to Jesus too. Like, you were of your father, the devil. That's what Jesus said. So, like, who's your father, Jesus or the devil? Like, so that's the Gospel of John chapter 9, right? It's trying to say, like, whatever side you are on is, solidified and proven by your actions. It could be evaluated by how the crowd treats you, right? How your neighbors treat you. Like, if you were of God and you love God and all those things, like, they would treat you how they treated Jesus. People won't like you. You won't fit in the crowd, right? You'll be just like Jesus. So, like, that's the text. And so if you read all of John 9, you see, like, literally this man born blind is Jesus. Like, it's crazy. Like, he acts like Jesus, he walks like Jesus, he talks like Jesus, he argues like Jesus. Well, he must be Jesus. Like, so, like, and that's what a believer should be. Like, we should not just, your name is your name, but you were bought with a price. Your life's not your own. Like, people should see Jesus through you. People should see living sermons through you, right? People should see the Bible through you. Like, your life is bigger than just you. So that's the text in John chapter 9. So that's why I want to share that with you guys, man. I titled today's video, The Neighbors of the Man Born Blind, right? We're focusing on John 9, 1 through 13. That's what I read, but the real focus is verses 8 through 13. So, yeah, guys, like, I just really enjoyed that study. And I didn't get to present it for my class, so I want to do it for my YouTube channel while it was still kind of fresh on my mind, because, like, I didn't get to do it for class. So, all right, but you guys know the drill, man. Here goes my social media platforms. I got the best social media platforms ever. I worked really hard on them. So if you go to my YouTube channel, Uplift past Crossroads, this is my 504th video. My 504th video. I got a whole lot more videos you can watch if you really enjoyed this. This is more academic and educational. So, like, most of my videos aren't like this. So I hope you enjoy it. It's just like a seminary school format, which you can get way more of your feel of that if you enjoy it. Just me talking about seminary school, elaborating on stuff I learned from seminary school, or any methodology of interpreting scripture, using some of the methods and interpretive practices I learned in seminary school. Yeah, check out this playlist, Seminary School, on my YouTube channel, Uplift past Crossroads. And then also, if you enjoyed me just talking about and breaking down John chapter 9 and some characters in John chapter 9, if you want to see me break down the parents of the man born blind, check out this video. I'll make sure to put it in the description of the video. I should already did it, but it's the video before this on my YouTube channel, Uplift past Crossroads. So just go ahead and go to my YouTube channel to see that, right? And then also, if you like podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from, just look up my YouTube channel on there, Uplift past Crossroads, and you can listen to me on podcasts as well. And then also, I'm on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Chromecast, so preferably Spotify, right? And then also my Facebook, LinkedIn, Sean Christopher Jenkins. I'm streaming live on there. I post every day on all my pages, man. So just go ahead and subscribe, man, and follow me, befriend me on all my pages, man. My X Twitter page, Trouble Don't Last. That's also my Snap, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. My other Instagram page, _Bible. My Tumblr page is Trouble Don't Last #1. And if you enjoyed me breaking down John chapter 9, check out that playlist on my YouTube channel, Uplift past Crossroads. You can listen to all the sermons and Bible studies I've done on John chapter 9. You enjoy me talking about the man born blind. You want to hear me talk about the parents and the neighbors, and just listen to sermons and Bible studies and future animations on that. Check out this playlist on my YouTube channel, the man born blind, the parents of the man born blind. What else is it called? Should be the neighbors of the man born blind, stuff like that. All right. So, yeah, guys, that's the video, man. I pray you guys enjoyed it. Or Jesus heals the man born blind. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, that playlist. All right. Hope you enjoyed that educational video. I'm about to go to sleep. You guys know Monday to Thursday, I work third shift. So, I'll see you guys later. I was supposed to have class today, but I didn't because, we're in reading week for seminary school. So, I guess I'll talk to you guys in a bit, man. Talk to you later. Peace out.